From the Appalachian News Room, I'm Moss Brennan, the political editor of the Appalachian Student Newspaper.
And I'm Editor-in-Chief Jackie Park. Today is Election Day in the United States.
Voters are choosing between polar opposite candidates on this year's ballot, with incumbent Republican President Donald Trump running for re-election and former Democratic Vice President Joe Biden, who's running for his first presidential term. Across the country, millions of people turned out to vote during the early voting period.
States like Texas have completely passed the total turnout in 2016, while North Carolina surpassed 60% of the total voter turnout. In 2016, almost 69% of registered voters in the Tar Heel State cast their ballots. In Watauga County, over 58.4% of total voters turned out to the polls during the early voting period. The App State Student Union early voting site saw nearly 6,600 voters during early voting, surpassing the total number of votes cast there in 2016.
Young voters are also turning out in force. More than 7 million young people aged 18 to 29 have already voted, according to numbers compiled by Circle Research Center at Tufts University.
In North Carolina, over 462,000 people between the ages of 18 and 29 have cast their ballots during the early voting period.
In 2016, 714,000 people between the ages of 18 to 29 cast their ballots, according to Circle.
We're here today to talk about the 2020 election with App State College Democrats President Dalton George and App State College Republicans President River Collins. River, Dalton, thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure of mine.
Glad to be here.
Yeah.
So how are you guys feeling today with this election? River?
Up to this point, I've been feeling very good.
Yeah.
On a local level and whatnot, early voting numbers, of course, Democrats with the absentee ballots and different things are outdoing us in numbers. But according to our calculations, as far as Democrats having a comfortable lead, that's not even close to the case. And I think on a local basis, we're doing very well. Donald Trump is lagging behind statewide, but I think I'm feeling good about it. It's going good so far.
I'm feeling really confident about the way we performed. We've had a lot of young people vote, which is obviously really good for the Democratic Party, especially locally. I think I have a lot of faith in the local candidates, and seeing students vote and the amount that they have has been really, I think, a rewarding experience kind of working on campus as much as we have.
Yeah. So how are each of you guys feeling about this election in general? Dalton, you can go first.
I think, everybody always calls it a historical election, but I think that's a pretty fair thing to say. I'm feeling like it's definitely going to change things. No matter who wins, you talk about realigning elections throughout the United States history, and I think we're definitely in the midst of one. I think no matter who wins, and whatever the results are, we're going to see a much different United States kind of moving forward. I think that's exciting to be young people in politics and working on a race like that. But I also think it's kind of stressful as well.
Dalton, you said you young people working in politics. What have you kind of done as a young person in politics?
So I got involved with the Democratic Party very early on up in this area. Worked closely with some town council on some housing issues that you and I we talked about that a little bit. College Democrats of both North Carolina and the chapter here. I've got my hands in a lot of different pots, as they say, but just kind of whatever I can do in the name of public service.
River, how are you feeling about this election?
I'm feeling very excited. This is really the first election that I've went beyond just researching different things and actually been severely involved. I've done all sorts of different things, lots of door knocking, phone banking, putting up signs, handing out literature, meeting candidates, working alongside candidates. It's been really exciting, and I'm looking forward to it a lot. It's been a lot of work involved, but I'm looking forward to it.
You mentioned door knocking. I know I covered Tim Moore when he came to campaign for Ray Pickett. He asked you guys how many doors he knocked on. You said 20,000. So have you guys? So is that kind of close to the number? You guys have been knocking on 20,000 doors.
Yeah, collectively, the Republican Party across this county has door knocked over 20,000 doors. It's been our focus, reaching out to voters, making that personal contact. That's our big focus. Personally connecting with voters.
What's kind of been the takeaway you've gotten with people as you talked with them about their thoughts on the election? I mean, you're going and saying, here's why you need to vote for my candidate. What's that pitch like? And, how are people responding?
It's pretty well half and half. There's a lot of people who will turn you down immediately, slam the door on you, might say a nasty comment. There's a lot of people who are really nice that will just kindly disagree, say I'm voting for the other candidate. That's just fine. I have no problem with that. But generally speaking, most rural areas around the county, the overwhelming amount of people that I have talked to have supported Trump and the Republican Party, and that looks good for me.
Dalton, you kind of with the Democratic Party. We all know that Boone is really the kind of Democrat force in Watauga County, kind of the rural areas, like River was saying, is kind of the more red area. So what have you been seeing? Have you guys been knocking on doors, kind of like Rivers talked about?
Yeah, I'm the canvassing director for the local Democratic Party, which is just kind of all kinds of voter outreach off campus, whereas, field operations is on campus. Talking to rural folks, like folks out in the precincts of Beaver Dam and kind of these, historically really deep Appalachia areas, they're voters that don't get kind of talked to a lot. They're really surprised to see you at their doorsteps. It's not really a typical rural area. It's an interesting and kind of unique conversations you can have out in deep Appalachia. And I've felt really confident kind of walking away from those conversations and kind of having these pragmatic discussions with undecided and swing voters.
So for you, when you go and talk with people, why should people in this election, if you're going to give your elevator pitch, if you will, why should people vote for the Democratic Party this year?
Right. I mean, I think healthcare is huge. I mean, we're in the midst of a pandemic and you see people losing their healthcare because it's attached to employment. I mean, that's obviously a system that's not working right now. Being young people, climate change and that issue is another huge wedge issue that you hear so many young people talk about, being out there in the polls with the pitches. It's, that's the one thing that you see a young person kind of resonate with. These are the candidates that care about climate action, healthcare, climate change, and, making an economy that works for everybody, an equitable economy, and, a situation where everybody can have a chance to thrive. I think that's the main issues that I would kind of pitch.
River, what about you? Why should people vote for the Republican Party?
My biggest thing is the economy. Personally, I'm an economy guy. I think it's the most important thing that any president can focus on. And to say that President Trump has done a great job for the economy for the past 4 years is an absolute understatement. And I know that over these next 4 years, he's going to continue to put in the same economic growth. It was just several years ago that Democrats were saying that manufacturing jobs that had left the United States would never come back, and Donald Trump proved them wrong. And I know that he's going to continue to do that. Another big thing for me is the issue of law and order. The past several months, there's been riots, lootings, different things, and not to belittle the Black Lives Matter movement, what it stands for, or the peaceful protesters out there, because I'm all fine. That's great. I support that. But the numerous cities, particularly Democratic ones, that have allowed people to come in, destroy private property, kill people, and not reprimand them. People are tired of it. And I think that the election numbers are going to show that. So those are my big.
You touched on a lot there, but I kind of want to go back to something that Dalton said as well, with the economy. So Dalton, you said that you wanted like an economy for everybody. So why do you think, River, there's that kind of clash between Democrats and Republicans? Dalton, you're saying economy for everybody. River, you're saying like the economy is strong right now. So why do you think there's that clash, River?
I think it's the tax issue and the regulations issue, generally speaking, Republicans, myself included. We love low regulation. It keeps things cheap, keeping things in the private sector. It can be done for a lot less than the government ever could imagine doing it for. Employers are able to hire people more, expand businesses greater when regulations are low, and it's just been shown. If taxes are increased, corporate taxes, different things, companies will either leave the United States or severely cut their employment force, and that's simply not what I want. I want as many companies here as possible so we can be as competitive as possible and have as many Americans with jobs as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think an economy that works for everybody. I mean, you look at when you adjust for inflation, people aren't making more than they made in the 60s, right? And they're more productive now. People are working more than they have ever been working before in their entire lives, and they're still making less. That's a huge issue that I'd like to touch on. The income inequality in the United States is growing and growing, right? A CEO way back in the 60s, right, would only make somewhere, a very small amount compared to the worker, right? Now you look at people like Jeff Bezos and people like that, right? And you compare that to their average worker. There's a huge discrepancy in this. When you're a more productive worker, right, when you're working hard, you deserve more. You deserve adequate pay. You deserve time off. I think a really concerning thing, too, is when you talk about strength of an economy, as the Republican Party has, as much as they have, they're talking about the strength of Wall Street. it's still hard for folks to buy groceries. It's still hard for folks to get gas. Things like that. That's what matters, not what's happening in Wall Street.
Jack, you want to take a follow?
Can you go to the
Yeah,
next
yeah,
one?
yeah,
Okay.
I can speaking to the gas thing. I think that Donald Trump's been great as far as gas prices go. I know personally myself. I remember gas prices through the Obama era got up to $4 and above in some cases, and I know now it's everywhere you look $2 or below, and that's a lot because he's expanded oil drilling, different things, and cut back certain regulations. Again, not environmental destroying regulations. Donald Trump does care about the environment, and anyone who would want to argue against that can look at things he's voted for, funded, and supported. So I think he's done many great things for everyone in all walks of life.
Jackie?
I do have a follow up. I think for each of you, I think we talk a lot about what Biden or Trump is going to do for the country. But I think it's really important for people to hear, what are they going to do here? What are they going to do in Boone? What are they going to do in Watauga County? So I guess I'd just be curious to hear from each of you. What are you hoping to see locally, especially as the country's recovering from COVID and we're hitting winter months. I mean, Boone usually sees a really high tourist season, and I'd imagine that these numbers are a lot lower than usual. So I'd just be curious to hear from each of you guys. What are you hoping to see from candidates, both locally and nationally, that are going to make a change here? You want to pick up first?
I'll go. I think, the Democratic Party has a real strength in an area like this. We live in a beautiful, very natural area, so preserving the environment and regulating businesses so they don't destroy natural, national parks, and our Blue Ridge Parkway is really important. The expansion of Medicaid at a local and state level is huge to support rural hospitals and hospitals that have been hit especially hard, like the one here in Watauga in terms of the strain related to the pandemic. I think with a town like this is very rural in the middle of not in the middle of nowhere, but in the middle of the deep mountains. I think it's important for an expansion of Medicaid and looking at kind of building that infrastructure for these rural areas and kind of providing them the assistance they need.
Personally, for me, providing for the infrastructure of rural communities is extremely important. Where I'm from is extremely rural. To me, Boone is a huge city. And people,
Where are you from?
I'm from Hayesville, North Carolina.
Okay.
It's about 460 in population in Clay County. And people always laugh when I tell them that Boone is a huge city. People are like, oh no, it's small. I think it's pretty big. And I think putting money into rural broadband access would be huge, because I know personally where I live, my internet goes out several times a day. And even when it does working, it's maybe 100 kilobyte download speed on a good day. I think expanding internet into more rural areas is great, especially seeing classes going online. And for the foreseeable future, a lot of people will be utilizing online classes. And that directly hurts rural communities. So seeing that would be huge. And again, putting more money into education in more rural areas. Rural kids need the same opportunity as urban kids, and I'm a firm believer in putting money into rural communities.
Something you mentioned, Dalton, as well as you, River, is talking about climate change and how the environmental policy. Trump just opened up one of the big parks in Alaska to logging. You see that he withdrew from the climate Paris Accord agreement. So I guess Democrats and Republicans kind of have differing issues on this. Why do you think that's so kind of clashing, and why do you think the Republican Party is more for opening kind of this stuff up?
I think the reason the parties clash is because they take extreme views in how economics and the environment can work together, whereas Democrats really think the environment must take focus and the economy needs to take a hit, and Republicans believe that the environment needs to take a hit for the sake of economics. So I believe that both can work together very well. And Donald Trump, while he has done certain like the logging, oil, fracking, several different things, he's also implemented, I know, worked with the Forest Service to start burning in several different areas. I know, especially out in California, he's been talking to the governor about that a lot in order to protect places that are very prone to wildlife fires and several different things. I think that's the main issue, is that there's a discrepancy between how to keep the economy going while keeping green and protecting the environment.
Dalton, I guess Republicans, when they're talking about when Donald Trump is opening up all these opportunities for new jobs, the economy and climate. Why do you like? Is there a way that can work together, where the economy can be opened up for more jobs, like these logging, oil jobs, instead of having more of those types of jobs?
Yeah, I mean, so America has always been this pinnacle of innovation, right? And I think that's something that we've always prided ourselves on. Yet, when it comes to this energy issue, right, on looking towards renewable energy, we're all in the past, right? I mean, it's like somebody making an argument for a horse in the advent of cars, right? I'd like to see America become an innovator again and look at renewable energy. I think that would be an economic generator, right? If we provide the technology necessary to generate energy in a clean and effective way, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't become I guess the poster child in terms of what to do, and countries would try to map that and encourage our professionals and specialists to kind of come and generate economic revenue in that way.
I guess a follow up I would have to that would be, we are in Appalachia, so we have coal mining families. I mean, so many of them have lost jobs in the last 5-6 years. So what would you kind of say to them in this transition period we might be seeing in coal to renewable energy? And what would you say to those families looking for jobs and that kind of thing?
Right. I mean, I think the really important thing about the coal industry is that a lot of those coal companies never treated those workers correctly in the first place. I mean, you hear about, the horrible union busting, right? The black, the miners' coal, the coal lung, and situations like that, lack of access to healthcare. I mean, those are real problems. And I think, any family that loses a job hurts, right? My dad, he got laid off. He was in a manufacturing furniture industry right outside of Winston-Salem. So it's like, I know what it's like to be that family. And I know what it's like to go through that struggle. But I think it's important to understand that, economies change and shift, and that comes with it. And to encourage a government that can assist these people and find them better access to better jobs.
River, do you have a response?
No, I mean, I agree. As technology and things get better, I'm not against completely green energy. I just don't think the technology is to the point now where we can dump so much into it and be there. I think there's an evolution to it. The idea that we can just flip to green, I think is far too drastic and not a good idea. I think more weaning on it, because I mean, there is a limited number of fossil fuels. It's non-renewable resources. That is going to be a problem decades from now. And it's something that we have to look at and prepare for. It's one thing in Western versus Eastern society. Westerners plan for the next 10 years, Easterners plan for the next 100 years. And as far as the energy problem goes, we need to think a little more like the Easterners.
So, obviously, North Carolina is a battleground state. You guys both lead two groups on campus, Republicans and Democrats. What have you guys been up to this year, and what have you done to prepare for this election day? Dalton?
I think talking to voters that otherwise wouldn't vote, right? I mean, young people historically don't vote as much as other demographics. So I think, making that argument towards young people, why this election matters to us, why this election affects us, I think that's been a huge goal of the chapter here. Obviously, providing resources. River talked a little bit about introducing people to candidates and volunteer opportunities, and, kind of following that model. And again, just kind of explaining to people why we can't afford to sit this election out, and why it's not enough to just vote, but, for the members of the club to work as hard as possible to get the candidates we agree with in office.
River?
Yeah, going off that, I know, speaking about trying to really get people to volunteer, I had an emergency meeting Wednesday because it's down to the wire. The election is soon. It's this Tuesday. And I told everyone this is the most monumental election, and at the very least, North Carolinian history. I've been looking at North Carolina politics a lot this semester, studying it, whatnot. And this could determine whether North Carolina is blue or red for the next decade. And students, people in our clubs, have an opportunity to directly impact that by getting out talking to voters. We've been mobilizing a lot. At least every Saturday, we have big door knocking events. We go hit hundreds off, usually over 1,000 doors every Saturday. We've been phone banking, making thousands of calls. Congresswoman Foster herself, actually, I've worked alongside her. She is making phone calls for candidates. Of course, keeping the club involved on campus, putting up signs. I know the first couple days of early voting, we had no signs. Me and a friend of mine made sure that we remedied that problem. We've been making sure that things are getting done, and I've really pushed volunteering this year. Where last year it's like I tried to get people involved, and people were really stagnant to come forward about it. Probably just because it was an election year. But this year, a lot of people have been getting involved, like I've wanted, and it's been great.
For our viewers, that's Congresswoman Virginia Fox, who represents
Oh
Watauga
yeah, I'm
County.
sorry.
All good.
Something I wanted to ask both of you guys about is, North Carolina is a battleground state, but even bringing it down to Boone, I mean, we've had Douglas Emhoff, Kamala Harris' husband, who's here, Mike Pence is here. I mean, there's just all sorts of big names related to this election coming here. So I guess, I'm curious sort of what that means for you guys and how you've been, maybe even mobilizing your people around, they're coming, they're here, they care. We're in Boone, we're in Western North Carolina, but they care. So I guess, how have you guys been kind of working that almost?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great opportunity to have, big candidates care about this area and, care about the student vote. We had Governor Cooper come to our meeting 2 nights ago, I think Thursday, and that was awesome to kind of see that and, have that conversation. I think people realize that, App State's really unique. We've got a lot of young voters that don't vote typically, just by nature of being young. And then we're also in an area that hasn't really been campaigned a lot, right? Like a presidential candidate hasn't came through the Appalachian a real tour since JFK. So we kind of create this perfect storm in terms of step up voters and, an area that historically is very underrepresented on the campaign trail. So kind of explaining to students and members of our club that, we're in the thick of that and that we kind of get a chance to have a real impact and meet these big names and I guess really just make the difference in a very unique area.
I think it shows the political weight that this area of the state carries. People often forget about Western North Carolina. It's the poorest, most underdeveloped part of the state. And generally speaking, all things show the state house seat here, currently held by Mr. Russell and being challenged by Mr. Pickett, pretty well, looking at the numbers and how close races are all around the state, this could be the seat that determines whether the General Assembly is Democrat or Republican. And believe me, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Donald Trump, and Mike Pence, they know that. They know how important this county is. I know I got interviewed by the Washington Post. They've been doing several stories about the most important counties in the country in several different states. This is the most important county in North Carolina. This will be the determiner whether this state stays red or goes Democrat. And they understand that, and they know the campaign here is very well worth the time. And it's been an extremely exciting opportunity because not everyone gets to say that they are in the battleground county of the state. It's been really fun, really interesting.
It's definitely been fun to cover, Jackie.
Oh my gosh. Lots of lack of sleep, I'll say.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Lots of that.
But it's almost done.
Yes. And so, obviously today is going to be a really big day for you guys, on election day. So, what are your plans? What are you doing? And how are you kind of, again, mobilizing your people to get active today? I mean, what are your plans? Dalton?
At every election day, we always set up a table and we can kind of check people's voter registration for them, let them know, their correct precinct, things like that. I think, things that are very complicated for people that aren't so interested in politics, people who are just trying to vote. So providing that information, providing rides to the polls, the correct precincts, letting people know their right to vote provisionally right here in the student union, even if it's not their traditional precinct. And just working to get the vote out as hard as possible.
I know, just for a response to that, I know during the March primaries, there was a lot of confusion about where people can vote on election day. I know Jackie and I, we kind of stayed out by the polls all day, and so many people came to the Blue Ridge Ballroom thinking they could just vote there because it was election day and it was a polling site. How have you kind of been educating people about where to vote on election day? Because unlike early voting, you have to vote in your precinct. And of course, App State is kind of split down the middle where you have people on West Campus, they kind of vote at the Agricultural Center. People on East Campus, they can vote in the Blue Ridge Ballroom. So how have you been educating voters on that? Since you mentioned that.
Right. Well, you can vote in any precinct in the county provisionally, which is, and that's the thing, is kind of explaining to people, look, if you're in a pinch, if it's hard for you to get somewhere else, it's better to vote provisionally. Obviously, that ballot goes through a much more strenuous process, and it's counted a little bit later, but, it still gets your voice heard. And that's the thing, kind of letting people know what they need to say if they want to cast a vote provisionally, kind of letting them understand the complexities of, being able to vote. We have a text that we send out and we kind of advise people, on their options when it comes to voting. I remember in 2018, this woman She was just got off work. She was trying to get before the polls closed, and she could only make it to the Deep Gap precinct. And that was like the first provisional vote that they had ever gotten, or something crazy like that. But she got to cast her vote just in time, which was really exciting. And just kind of spreading that information, letting people know about all the options they have.
Our big thing about being engaged on election day is all about handing out literature. Election day, that's Republican Day. We all love voting on election day. Where Republicans tend to be especially weary of voting by mail, and a lot don't early vote because it's tradition. You vote on election day. And we're going to make sure that we have plenty of people throughout the precincts, especially on campus, handing out literature. And a board of election members, something very easily overlooked, but their parties aren't listed. And getting something in people's hands with their party, and all these different things, saying these are our candidates, ensuring that people know who their choices are for their party is wholly important. And we're going to make sure that we have poll workers throughout the whole day, 8 to 6:30, I believe. It's a lot to cover, but we're going to do it. And that night we're going to have a watch party at the Republican Party headquarters and watch it all unfold.
I believe, I might have misheard you because of the mask, but I believe you said Board of Elections. I believe it's Board of Education. That's
nonpartisan. Did I say that?
I'm not sure. It could have been just mishearing from the mask.
Yeah, Board of Education. Board of Education party members are not listed.
I want to ask you about one thing. I think that when I've been talking with people, I think a lot of people have been wary of mailing in their ballots, especially now that there's a lot of questions about the postal service. Are they going to be delivered on time? That kind of thing. But we have seen on election day traditionally here at the Blue Ridge Ballroom. I mean, the line is insane. It goes way out. And now, of course, with COVID, social distancing measures, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. So I guess, I'm curious your thoughts as someone who, I don't know if you have or not, but, if you're going to vote on election day, are you worried at all about maybe the time it'll take or the extra steps that are going to have to take place with so many people coming in plus COVID?
Yeah, there definitely is a worry. Personally, I did vote early just to make sure that I'd have plenty of time to work on election day and hand out different things. But I think this year it's not going to be as bad because of how many people have mailed in their ballots and how many people have early voted. All across the country, historic numbers. And I think that election day, while of course it will still be crowded, for a lot of people it's a tradition. They would never do anything other than vote on election day. And that's understandable. It's got this stigma about it. It's just voting on election day. That's so civic, and it's it's your duty as a citizen. But I trust the Board of Elections all around the country to take the proper steps to make sure things are done safely. Things are being sanitized, social distancing maintained, masks are being enforced. Plenty of opportunities for curbside voting for especially the elderly or people with pre-existing conditions that could be harmed very badly or worse due to the coronavirus, different things like that. I trust the precincts to take care of that. So
I wanted to ask both of you, talk about this early voting surge, and really, wherever you said this, all across the country, it's been this huge early voting surge. We mentioned it in our little introduction. I mean, Texas surpassed their total 2016 turnout in early voting. I mean, North Carolina got pretty close to surpassing our total turnout. Watauga County, same thing. I know the student union voting site, the Blue Ridge Ballroom, they had more votes during early voting than the entire 2016 period. So why do you think so many people are early voting? Why is this just such a key thing in this year? River?
That's a really good question. I mean, history is being made here as far as voter turnout. It's particularly interesting to watch. I think a lot of people are both emboldened and hurt by Donald Trump. You see Trump supporters in Trump parades, boat parades, people driving through the streets in huge lines, caravans with all these Trump flags, these huge groups. Presidents never had that before. Presidents never elicited that kind of emotion from people before. People won't go out and vote for him. I also think that there's been few presidents as controversial as Donald Trump. And I feel like whether people like Joe Biden or not, they're going to go and vote against Donald Trump. And I feel like that's why turnout has been so especially huge, because of how much Donald Trump is loved among people and how much he's hated among people.
Yeah, so we've been out every day early voting, talking to folks at the polls, and I had one guy come up to me, and he was voting against Donald Trump more so than for Joe Biden, but he kind of expressed this desire for a return to normalcy, and I think that's what a lot of Americans are feeling. Politics has kind of became this all-encompassing thing that kind of consumes us every hour of every day, just by the nature of the way the current president kind of interacts with the media, the way he kind of carries himself. I mean, we're always being bombarded by sensational, headlines of what has he done next, right? What else has he said? And I think people want to return to kind of what it was like before, what it was like to have a traditional president, one who carries himself in a very traditional way in terms of the way the office is.
So now to move on to something totally different, we did ask our readers what this election means to them. So here's what a few of them had to say. One reader wrote that they wanted to, quote, to voice my opinion in a very large election. Another one said, I feel as though this election will literally be life or death for certain populations in America. And finally, another said, the vote I make on election day is not for me, it's for all future generations, end quote. So I guess, to each of you, what does this election mean to you? River, you want to
go? Up to this point, this election means everything to me. I've never been as involved in an election. I got into politics my freshman year of high school. I was in the current affairs / debate class, and our teacher had us watch all the Democratic and Republican debates, the primaries, the presidential debates, everything, and he had us take notes on the candidates, what they wanted, had us research the parties, different things, and make our decisions, who we thought the best candidates were, why we supported them, and be able to defend why we supported them. And having put personally so much of my own time, effort, and money, to say I've prioritized my work in the election over my classes is a severe understatement. My work in the election has taken precedent far over my classes. But not only what I've personally put into it, what it means for America. Donald Trump is kind of what I describe as like a real American. He shoots you straight, he's patriotic, he loves this country. And to see 4 more years of back when I was 15, felt so inspired to get into politics by would be amazing. It would mean a lot for me, and it would mean a lot for tens of millions of Americans all around the country.
This election, it means everything. I think it means having a country that we can be proud of. And we've always came short of that as a country. We've never had the equity that we've always promised, right? There's systemic issues that hold people down, and they did long before Trump. But I think it's, rejecting the rhetoric that has been, put forward by Trump and building, a nation that we can be proud of again. I feel like I've been less proud to call myself an American after what happened in 2016 and taking our country back, right? Making a country that prides itself on working together, on being diverse, right? On having an economy where everybody can get a shot. I'd like that. And obviously those have been challenges forever, right? But I think they've worsened. And I'd like to get back on the slow crawl towards, the initial promise that was made, that, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
One kind of thing that we hear as journalists from Democrats and Republicans, but really Democrats, is saying, like, this is a life-changing election. Like, this will mean so many things for Democrats, like, if Donald Trump is reelected. But Republicans are saying, like, some Republicans say the same things. So why do you guys think that Republicans and Democrats pretty much have the same view of, like, if the opposite party is elected, that's like the end of the world for them? Dalton, why do you think that?
I think climate change is a huge thing. Because it kind of is the end of the world if we don't get it fixed, right? Just with the way trends are going. And I think that's a huge concern, right? And again, I don't think anybody can make the argument that since 2016, we've become more divided. People are less likely to, even discuss, have conversations with people they disagree with. I think those are the things that lead to a death of a nation. Climate crisis, right? The inability to come together, and those are issues that will only worsen if we get 4 more years of Trump. And I don't think we can handle them. So I think it would be the end, and it not just the end of progressive policy or Democratic policy, but the end of us. Yeah.
River?
What was the question again?
So Democrats and Republicans kind of like they say that like Democrats will say if Donald Trump's reelected, it's like the end of the world. Republicans will say Joe Biden's elected, it's the end of the world for them. Why do you think it's that's
Okay,
opposite
right.
in like?
Sorry, it slipped my mind.
All good, all good.
I think if Donald Trump loses this election, it will cement my theory and idea that this country has no idea what it's doing. Back the past several hundred years, generally speaking, there's always been a dominant party. For the longest time, Republicans had power where, I believe, for like a span of 60, 80 years or something like that, there was 2 Democratic presidents. And then the Democrats had their turn where it was pretty well Democratic control. And ever since Clinton, we've been flip-flopping presidents who's went from Clinton to Bush to Obama to Trump. And if we see the country flip back to Biden, it will show that the country, in my mind, has no idea what it wants, what it's looking for. Whereas I see if Donald Trump is reelected, especially if he's able to pull off the popular vote and get more votes than in 2016, it'll show that the country is heading in a direction of solidarity, where maybe people are starting to come behind an idea, maybe support one party over the other again, and we can get back to that system where politics wasn't such a dogfight. Because that's the problem. The presidency and, generally speaking, the House and Senate are so competitive. People don't want to work together because, well, if we can make the other party look bad, and this goes for Democrats and Republicans equally, if we can make the other party look bad and take back control, well, let's do that. And I think if we can cement control in the presidency, we could go back to getting things done, regardless of what party is doing it. And I think that would be great. It'd be productive for America and its citizens.
One kind of thing I want to kind of push back a little bit on there before I want to let Dalton you respond is this kind of sentiment isn't new. That like it's you have 2000 people said if Republicans win it's going to be the end of the world. 2008 if Obama won, we kind of have this back and forth thing. So I guess and then we'll touch. I also want to touch on the popular vote in electoral college because Jackie, that's a big thing kind of deal. But I kind of wanted you to nail down like why do you think there's just that clash of every year it's I mean that flip has happened for the past few presidents, and every year I mean America is still here. We might be different economy, kind of all this unrest, but why do you think that despite America is still thriving, we're still here, it's not the end of the world, but people think it is?
Americans have the ability to persist through any situation that comes their way. And generally speaking, I think the reason things have been flip-flopping so hard, alongside the point that I made earlier, is because, generally speaking, parties take turns choosing unelectable people. Generally speaking, back in 2000, Al Gore, generally speaking, not excited. People are normally not excited about a vice president running or getting the nomination, just historically speaking. Flash forward to 2008. You're your first African American ever nominated to be president. That's unbelievably exciting. And John McCain, and then go forward to Mitt Romney, 2 people, generally speaking, Americans were not very excited about. Personally, I never have been a Mitt Romney fan, and I mean, I understand the way the country was going with that. And I think the party, the parties have, they take their turns, where it's just one candidate clearly has a greater electability than the other. And the way one of my professors put it, it's just sit down and think, your average American, which candidate would they rather have a beer with? And generally speaking, you look back through who's been elected, you can kind of see, yeah, that makes sense whenever you look at it.
Is it about the end of the world or?
Yeah, I mean, these were responses to what River said.
I mean, yeah, I think having a candidate that can relate to people is really important. I think Joe Biden, kind of seeing what he comes from, I guess, I think that's relatable, right? If we're talking about relatability, we've got somebody, I always like to say it this way. It's like Donald Trump's really never known what it's like to face failure. And I mean that in this way of, I come from a really poor family, right? So it's like when I'm taking my ACT or trying to get into college, right? If I mess up, that might be it. That might be the last chance I get. My goose is cooked. Whereas him, the wealth that he was born into, right? The means, the opportunities he's had, the people he's been introduced to just by virtue of his last name. He doesn't know what that's like. You know what I mean? To look it in the eye and say, man, am I going to be able to eat tonight? And I think that is just absolutely, I mean, it blows my mind that he represents everybody. So, when you talk about somebody you can get a beer with, I get a beer with Joe Biden.
But I guess, as a kind of closing thing here, what would you guys say to someone who's walking into the polls today? And, what would you, I guess, want them to think about and want them to know for the next 4 years, whether that's, talking about a local race, a senator, a representative, or it's talking about, our president? What would you want people to know?
I guess, with president, I guess vote for, stability, for kind of a return to kind of what we expect from a president. For governor, vote for a governor that believes in a pandemic, believes in scientists, right? Believes in restrictions to keep his citizens safe. For state rep and Ray Russell, vote for somebody that believes in, public education, right? Vote for somebody that believes in climate change, believes in being pragmatic, right? Working across the aisle. I just vote for the folks that are really going to put the policies in place that keep our planet safe, and help the next generation of Americans.
I would like to say, someone walking into the polls, I want them to vote their heart and mind. We all have morals, and we all have things that mean more to us than they ever could anyone else. And to sell that out, going to the polls would be to betray yourself and to betray your country. If you feel like voting for Donald Trump in your heart is what you should do, great. If you think voting for Joe Biden in your heart is what you think you should do, also great. But I also want to remind people, aside from that, going to the polls, they need to think about things that have been an issue through this pandemic. I've seen things that, quite honestly, I consider tyrannical. When I take a look at New Jersey, I know it's not this one anymore, but back when you look and people were being arrested for going to church, but they kept liquor stores open and different things. And people were trying to have church in cars separated from everybody. That's a clear infringement on the First Amendment. And you look at our state with our governor, we were the last state to open gyms. California and New York opened gyms before we did. Businesses are hurting, people are suffering, and I understand the pandemic is important and we need to take care of our people. But the more rights that we take away for a seemingly good reason, that just leads into a slippery slope for more rights to be taken down the road, and I would warn people about that.
Dalton, you seem like you just want to respond to that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I completely get where River's coming from. Sacrifice is difficult. I don't know. I like to think back to World War II, right? When the government was saying, victory gardens, right? Limit your water intake, right? Don't tell people what you're seeing on the news. I mean, we didn't even report weather at points because we were afraid of, bomb raids. That's sacrifice, and that's sacrifice to keep us safe. And I think it comes with the territory. Is it hard? Absolutely. Is it what we need to do to keep folks safe? Absolutely.
River, you have any quick response to that?
I think we've covered it quite well. I just to say people to just be careful when you give power up to the government, it's not taken away, except through force.
All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
I was glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming, and make sure you guys stay tuned to our website, theappalachianonline.com, and our Twitter @theappalachian for coverage throughout the day and into the night. Also tune into 90.5 WASU and App TV for live coverage tonight from 6 to 9 p.m.